Before today's video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest videos. If you want to see a case or topic covered by Paranormally Listed, then go to criminallylisted.com and fill out the questionnaire under the Suggest a Case tab. Number 3. The Phantom Train, a Medicine Hat. Trains are an incredible mode of transportation. They've served to bring people and supplies back and forth all over the world for centuries. It's one of the oldest forms of mass transportation, and even in our ever-evolving world, they are still used frequently for people to get from place to place. They are also placed for some scary hauntings. If the idea of a train coming right at you scares you, you're definitely not alone. If you claim that this scenario doesn't scare you, think about this. Trains are stuck on the track they're on, they can't make a U-turn, they can't stop quickly, and they can't go on the shoulder to avoid you. So if you're ever on a train and think another train is coming right at you, you should be scared. This is something that one railway fireman, also known as a stoker, which is the person who looks after shoveling the coal on the train, experienced twice. It was the summer of 1908. Gus Day was working for the Canadian Pacific Railway line in Alberta. The train he was on was traveling from Medicine Hat Railway Station to Dunmore. When they were just 2 miles outside of Medicine Hat, they noticed a train racing towards them. Day was with Robert Bob Toohey, who was the engineer. They tried to pull the brakes, hoping to avoid colliding with the oncoming train, but they knew that nothing they did would be enough. Then, something amazing happened. Just as they were about to crash, the train deviated to the right and drove past Day's and Toohey's train. As the train rode by, they saw people in the cars, heard whistles, and saw lights. As you can imagine, Day and Toohey were shocked by the incident. But it seems that Toohey was most affected by the encounter with the ghost train. Not only did he take a leave from his job, but he also saw a fortune teller. He was concerned that the event was a premonition of something bad. Unfortunately, the fortune teller didn't exactly have good news for him. He was told that he would die within the month. Nevertheless, Day decided to go back to work. Day stayed on the job and after a while thought perhaps the incident wasn't real. Later, he was on the train taking the same route, but this time with an engineer named J. Nicholson. When they reached the same location, the same scary incident occurred. This was enough for Day to decide that he needed some time off and requested yard duty instead. On the other hand, Nicholson felt like he could go back to work. However, they all should have listened to the fortune teller because on July 8, 1908, a passenger train collided with another train only 2 miles outside Medicine Hat and in the same location that they saw the ghost train. 7 passengers died in the crash. Both Nicholson and Toohey were working on the train, and they were both killed in the collision. The fireman on the train, H. Thompson, managed to jump from the train just before the collision. So, what did they see those 2 nights before the collision? Was the phantom train a warning, a glimpse into the future? Who knows? Ultimately, Gus Day was lucky enough to experience the warning twice, enough to convince him to stop working on the trains. Toohey and Nicholson were not as lucky. Number 2. The Gurdon Light. Now let's go from Alberta, Canada to Gurdon, Arkansas, which is a little south of Little Rock, where another interesting visual appears on the train tracks. This one seems less insidious than a train coming right towards you, but it is no less mystifying. The mystery of Gurdon is lights that appear about 1 to 3 feet above the railroad tracks. If you go to Gurdon and want to see those lights, you must go about 2.5 miles from the highway. If you take Interstate 30, then you'll find the right spot east of the interstate on Highway 67. The lights change color. Sometimes they are white-blue in color, and other times they are orange. The lights only appear for about 10 seconds at a time, and they can move. Sometimes people will find them in front of them, and other times they are behind them. Locals say if you see the lights behind you, it's a bad omen. There are several explanations as to what the lights could be. The first explanation takes us back to December 1931. At the time, there was a foreman named Will McLean, and he wasn't too happy with one of his employees. The employee in question was Lewis McBride. There are two stories as to what McLean was unhappy about. The story that seems most likely is that McLean suspected McBride of damaging a part of the tracks which caused a train derailment. This seems to be the more accurate story because McBride told the story to the Southern Standard newspaper. The second story was that McBride asked McLean for more work, but McLean was either unable or unwilling to provide him with more hours. Either way, the two were at odds, and that's the most important part to know. Lewis McBride was so angry that he ended up killing his boss, Will McLean, with a pickaxe. McBride confessed to committing the crime and was subsequently given the death penalty and executed on July 8, 1932. Now, we know what you're thinking. What does this have to do with some lights? Well, the Gurdon lights on the railroad track were first reported to be seen after the murder. Some people think that's perhaps the ghost of Will McLean walking around the train tracks. The reason they think that's what it could be is because the lights that appear and move around can be mistaken for a lantern light being held by an invisible person. Another theory is that's a different ghost that used to work on the railroad. This worker fell into the path of an oncoming train and was decapitated. The head was never found, so some people think it's the worker's lantern and he's constantly searching for his missing head. There has been some scientific research into the lights as well. Physics professor Dr. Charles Lemming has investigated the Gurdon lights for some time and has discussed some possibilities. One theory that has been put forth but Dr. Lemming feels is debunked is that the lights come from the highway. A major problem is that the lights were first sighted in the 1930s and the interstate was constructed in the 1970s. Another theory that was posited is that the lights are swamp gas. However, some feel that this one is also debunked because the lights are still visible on windy days when swamp gas isn't seen. One theory that some people think has the most credibility, which is a piezoelectric effect, which is an electric current that is created when quartz crystals are under pressure. Gurdon is situated right above a whole bunch of quartz crystals. Another interesting fact is Gurdon is also on the New Madrid fault line. So it's believed that geological pressure from the fault line creates electricity, which interacts with the quartz crystals, creating the light. When the lights first appeared after the murder of McLean, there was an earthquake in the area. However, like any good paranormal theory, there are a couple things that don't make sense. The piezoelectric effect doesn't explain how the lights appear above the Earth's surface, and also doesn't explain why the lights are in the shape of a ball. Regardless, the actual existence of the lights is well documented and well researched, but what is exactly causing them to be there is still unexplained. Number 1. The Ghost Train in Marshall Pass, Colorado. Now we head to Marshall Pass in Colorado for our last entry on the list. Marshall Pass, like much of Colorado, is at high altitude. We're talking 10,846 feet above sea level. Marshall Pass can be found in the Swabash Range between Salida and Gunnison. A railroad called the Denver-Rio Grande Railway was built over Marshall's Pass between 1880 and 1881. Supposedly, there was a ghost train around Gunnison. The rumors seem to have some credence, as it turned out many engineers decided to quit working on the railroad. However, two people, Nelson Edwards and Charles Whitehead, were unconcerned about these rumors. They were working on that railroad for some time, and over 2 months hadn't experienced anything unusual. One particular night, Nelson did have concern, but had nothing to do with a ghost train. He was worried about something much more tangible. The tracks ahead had a slightly weakened bridge, and there was also a faulty rail on the tracks. So there were concerns, but none of them of the paranormal variety. That day they had just finished going through a snow shed, and then they heard a train whistling. Hearing a train whistle isn't something out of the ordinary, especially for people who work on trains, but the issue was they didn't see a train anywhere. Nelson decided to stop the train because he heard the conductor's sign to do so. But the conductor didn't give a sign and didn't know why Nelson was stopping the train. Not only did the conductor not want Nelson to stop the train, he actually wanted him to pick up speed because it appeared that a train was coming from behind them and they were gaining speed. So they started to accelerate to avoid getting hit by the train behind them. When Edwards looked at the train gaining on them, he saw a white figure on top of one of the cars. Not only that, but the person was waving at them. Edwards managed to get on the side tracks and saw two more white figures in one of the cars. To add creepy to strange, one of the figures looked right at Edwards and laughed. Their main concern was the bridge, but they managed to ride over it without any problems. However, they were now approaching the faulty section of the railroad track. Edwards saw what looked like workers on the broken rail, but he could not slow the train down. However, when they drove through the area, all the workers seemingly vanished into thin air. Finally, even though they were worried about getting hit by the train behind them, they decided to stop. According to an account of the incident published in May 1889 in the Rocky Mountain News, after the train drove through the area with the vanishing workers, the ghost train jumped the faulty track and flew into the canyon. After the incident, Edwards and Whitehead found an icy, poorly spelled message written in frost on the window. It reads, "Years ago a freight train was wrecked, as you saw. Now that you saw, we will never make another run. The engine was not under control and 4 section men were killed. If you ever ran on this road again, you'll be wrecked." The ghost train never returned and nothing was recovered from the supposed crash into the canyon. It was as if nothing occurred at all. Nelson Edwards decided to quit and went to work with the Union Pacific Railroad. He never encountered another ghost train again. Thank you so much for watching this video. We hope you found it interesting. If you did find it interesting, please make sure you subscribe. We'll have a new video about the paranormal every week. If you just discovered this channel, please make sure you check out our other channel, Criminally Listed. We have over 325 videos featuring bizarre but true crime stories. You can find it at youtube.com/criminallylisted. We also have a podcast about cold cases that were eventually solved called Criminally Listed Presents Into the Killing. You can find it on Stitcher, Spotify, Amazon Music, and anywhere you find great podcasts. But that's all for today. Thanks again for watching.